how to avoid common exercise mistakes. Now, we're also going to be going over the most popular 4 exercises that I see massacred on a daily basis in the gym. It's like, it seems like, and I'm making a generalization, and I don't like generalizations, you guys, but to get my point across, it's like, it seems like the general public knows how to do these exercises only incorrectly. So we are going to clear that up tonight. So we're going to be going over 4 key exercises as well as the common mistakes I see with the form corrections and how to perform, execute, and get the most out of every single rep across all exercises, but specifically these 4, which I'm going to tell you guys in a minute. And I'm also going to be hopefully giving you guys some tips, some education, some knowledge on exercises in general and some concepts that you can apply to your training no matter what exercise you're doing or where you are training. If you're training at home, if you're training at the gym, if you're literally training in the middle of the field because you're camping. I really like to teach principles and teach you guys how to think, because then you can take that knowledge and apply it yourself. You're not just, blindly following something. Got some more viewers. Jolene, hello. Awesome, you guys. Thank you so much to everyone who is tuning in. Again, drop us a comment as you join. I can't see comments right now, but I will definitely check them out later. Jessica, Randy, Jennifer, awesome. We got some more viewers. Christine, Laura is here. You're going to love this one. All right. So let me know in the comments, even though I can't see you guys, drop in a comment, say, me or I have, if any of these things have happened to you. So you're at the gym, you're training, you're at home, whatever the case, you are doing an exercise, but you're like, I don't really know if I'm doing this right, or something about it just feels off. Something about that exercise just doesn't feel right. And drop the exercise in the comments too, if you can think of one that comes to your mind. Maybe you have been training consistently and you are putting in the work, but your body isn't really changing. And you're like, okay, am I doing the exercises that are actually best for my goals? Am I performing this exercise in the best way for my body? Have you guys ever questioned that? Have those thoughts or questions ever come up in your mind? Or sometimes, you're doing an exercise and you don't actually know where you should be feeling it. And it's like, okay, maybe I'm not going heavy enough. But then the heavier you go, it seems like the worse and worse it feels. Not in a good way, you guys. Let me know if that has ever happened to you guys. I can't see your comments, but I'm going to assume that has probably happened to a large majority of you. I know that used to happen to me before I knew what I was doing in the gym. Back in the day when I was in college and university, like 2012, 2013, I honestly had no idea what I was doing. And what was happening, and what I see so commonly with, women and men in the gym is they're doing too much. They're trying to do so many different things and none of it is being done effectively. And this one, again, I need you guys to open your mind, and I'm going to teach you exactly why this is so important to embrace and understand. You are lifting too heavy and you are losing the actual benefit of the exercise. So I know that quite a few of you guys who commented on the welcome post in the challenge talked about having the word like strength or the word growth, or those of you who do have a goal of muscle growth. A lot of the time, unfortunately, we are actually lifting too heavy. And I know that it is really cool to be able to increase your weight over time. And a byproduct of a proper training plan and proper training is getting stronger over time, right? But when you are training for body recomposition, weight loss, or muscle growth, you're not training to be a power lifter. You're not training for your 1 rep max, because there's a difference between lifting a really heavy weight for 1 or 2 or 3 reps, and there's a difference between giving your muscles the actual stimulus that they need to grow. It is very possible to get stronger without actually building any muscle. However, it doesn't usually work the other way around. It's very, very challenging to get to build more muscle and not also get stronger as a byproduct. However, that strength sometimes will take a little bit longer. And if you have bad habits in the gym, you guys, if you have some type of unintentional muscular imbalance, some type of movement imbalance, or you have accidentally been doing an exercise wrong, it will take some time to reprogram that, and it's gonna feel like you have to take a step back. And sometimes you do, and sometimes that step back is reducing the weight, sometimes it's reducing the reps, sometimes it's reducing the range of motion, but it is so worth it, because if you keep moving through your training with shitty form, even if you don't mean it to be shitty, or you keep lifting too heavy because your ego is getting in the way, it is going to take you backwards. And I know that sounds so cliche and easy to say, oh, it's going to take you backwards, but it will literally take away the work from the target, from the muscle that you are trying to target. And it's going to either create a larger imbalance, it's going to make you plateau way quicker, or it's going to strengthen up the muscles, and you're going to find some muscles becoming weaker and some muscles becoming tighter. Let me know in the comments if this is making sense. Heather, what is up? Krista, hello. Megan, hello. All right, so you guys, we are going to be going over 4 key exercises. I'm going to walk you through the proper execution, the proper setup, as well as some tips that go with them. And then we're going to talk about a few things that are going to apply across the board. So the exercises that we are going to be going over, they are going to be your deadlift. So specifically your Romanian deadlift, your RDL, basically kind of like a stiff leg deadlift. We're going to be going over a squat, and we are going to be going over lateral raises and rows. All right, so those are the 4 that we're going to go over. I am going to try to keep this full training under 45 minutes. So you may want to take notes, you guys may want to hit replay, because I'm probably going to talk a little bit fast. Now, before I break down the exercises, there are 5 things you guys want to remember. Now, if you are a client, hopefully you guys know these by now, especially if you've been with us for a couple of years. If you're in your first 1, 2, 3 months with us, again, some of this might be new to you, but in the client group, there is a ton of training on all of this stuff under the training guide, as well as in the app under your exercise demos. So 5 key concepts when it comes to proper training, proper weightlifting, when it comes to body composition, muscle growth, weight loss, and changing the way your body looks and feels and moves in the gym, okay? It is awareness. I'm going to go through them. I'll quickly explain. Awareness, setup, stability, initiation, execution. Those are the 5 concepts that you want to kind of go through that checklist mentally every single time you do an exercise. Always, 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 no questions asked until it is so autopilot and so default into your brain that you do not have to think about it anymore, that it is so innate inside of you that you just do it. Like when you walk into a dark room, you just turn on the light. And that's going to take a while. It's going to take at least a year if you've never done it before. Laura, drop a comment. I know you're here. Well, I'm sure you're here. Talk about how important, mind-muscle connection is and those 5 concepts are, because I know that you really, really embrace those. Same with, Joan, Bella, all of my kind of bodybuilding style ladies. Drop a comment in there. Awareness. So the awareness is, what is the goal of the exercise? What muscle are you trying to work? Now, again, I don't expect you guys, unless you want to be experts on anatomy or physiology. Like, that is why you have a coach, that is why you have a training plan. But I do expect you guys, especially my clients, to have a general idea of where you should feel the muscle. It's the very least you can do for yourself, okay? So awareness. What is the exercise and where should you be feeling it, okay? That is the basis of starting, awareness. Next, we're gonna talk about the setup, okay? So your stance, your posture, your form, your grip, your positioning, all of that really, really matters. Laura and I were talking about this a week or 2 ago, how so many people, they just grab the weights, they just grab the bar, and they just go. And you look at them, and the bar is crooked, the weights are uneven in their hands, their posture's off, their stance is uneven, and they're trying to do something like this. And then they wonder why they're getting pain and no results, right? It's in the setup. If you're not setting yourself up properly, you're setting yourself up to fail. Stability. Laura also knows how important stability is, especially as you move through your fitness journey and you do start to get stronger and you are moving heavier loads. Stability is everything. Stability is also important when you are just getting back into the swing of things, or you are new to the gym. Stability is important all the time, because you have to be stable in order to properly move through resistance. If you think about trying to lift weights on an ice rink, there's no way you could move that amount of weight because you're sliding all over the place. So when you are doing any single lift, any movement, even if it's something basic like a bicep curl, you want to be rock solid in your stance, in your core, in your posture. You want to imagine, those of you who work in like Fort Mac or on site, think of like a haul truck. If a haul truck fucking hit you, you wouldn't move. That is how stable you want to be. If you don't know what that truck is, it's a truck that's like the size of a house. So that is how stable. So even when before I'm doing my exercise, I'm already, like right now, nothing is moving. I am driving myself into the floor. I am tight. I am stable. Then we have initiation. Okay? The initiation of the movement. So the muscle that initiates the movement is typically going to work the hardest. Now, when you are a beginner or even an intermediate, sometimes that's a challenging concept to understand because you might not have that connection yet. Like for me, my quads and my glutes were really challenging for me to grow, if I'm being honest. My upper body will blow up. My lower body, not so much. So I didn't even know that I could like engage my quads and initiate with them because I didn't have very good quad muscles. So it took me a couple of years to be able to be like, okay, I'm initiating this movement like with my quads because I want this to like I want my quads to get the most out of this movement. Same thing with my glutes. It took me a really long time to be able to properly like initiate something like with my glutes and like actually use my glutes in movements. It took a couple of years for me to do that. But hopefully the tips I give you tonight will accelerate that for you guys so it doesn't take you guys a couple of years. So initiation, the muscle that initiates or sometimes moves first is going to do the majority of the work. So we want to be aware of that, right? If you're starting a row, I'm not going to skip ahead. We're going to go in order. And then execution, the actual execution of the movement pattern. So the control, the range of motion, that's going to look a little different for everyone. It might depend on your body. It might depend on the individual set. We're going to talk about that later. Your form, your actual proper form of the exercise, and then the time under tension. Does that make sense, you guys? Let me know in the comments. Michelle, hello. Amanda, Carolyn, what is up? Carolyn started Shred. I don't know if Erin is here. Erin also started Shred this week. Ramsey did that beautiful live stream in the group earlier if you guys are interested in Shred or learning a little more about our programs. All right, now before I break down the exercises, question I get all the time, especially from new clients, is how much weight should I lift? How much weight? It's like, I don't know where to start. There's all these dumbbells. How much weight should I lift? I don't know how much weight you should lift. The rule of thumb, you guys, is you want to start with the lightest weight possible. Now, I don't literally mean the lightest weight possible. You want to start lighter than you think you should and get the absolute most out of that movement, setting up everything. So going through your awareness, going through your setup, making sure you are ultra stable, you are initiating with the working muscle, you are controlling and executing properly. And then when you hit your desired rep range, if that was too easy, then you increase the weight, okay? Oftentimes we jump ahead because we think we can lift more, but then we miss out on so many gains because we're not setting up properly. We're not actually controlling the movement and we are taking away work from the target muscle. So for example, like I typically will do my bicep curls with like around a 15, give or take, right? And for me, I can get, really good quality reps with a 15-pound dumbbell. Could I bicep curl this 40? Yup, I could. That's an extreme exaggeration. Do you see the point of that? There is none. I worked everything except my biceps. More weight is not better in bodybuilding, especially if, again, you're a powerlifter, you're training for a powerlifting meet, you literally have to hit a 300-pound 1 rep max. That's a completely different goal. If you are here to lose weight, tone up, and reshape your body, it doesn't matter how heavy you lift. Sure, strength is a byproduct, but proper form and execution always, always, always needs to be number one. All right, I'm gonna take a quick drink, then we're gonna hit up the exercises. Before I do that, while I'm taking a drink, if you're a client, you should know the answer to this. There are 2 and only 2 functions of your muscles. Your muscles only do 2 things. What are they? Drop it in the chat. What are the 2 things? You guys, if you're a client, you should know this. Justine, I feel like you definitely will know this one. Drop it in the chat. All right, so deadlifts. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys the answer. Your muscles only lengthen and shorten. They do not do anything else. They lengthen. Here's my bicep. It is in its lengthened position. Here it is in its shortened position. Lengthened, shortened. It's even gonna get more fully shortened up here, because I won't go into that, but yes. So your muscles, they only lengthen and they shorten. That is literally the epitome of what your muscles do. They don't do anything else. So when you are going through any exercise, you want to be thinking about that. Can I get my muscle to its fully lengthened position and its fully shortened position? So again, when I gave that example of the 40-pound dumbbell curl just now, right, I would be like going like this. So sure, maybe I'm moving it, but I'm actually kind of playing that zero-sum game because I'm not lengthening it to its full ability, nor shortening it to its full ability. Now with your deadlifts, I'll show you a quick, I'm sure you guys know what deadlifts are. So your RDL, right? I'll show you a quick demo from the front and then a quick demo from the side, and we'll break it down. So basically you're gonna set up your stance. So they're looking like this, right? These are your deadlifts. I'm gonna talk about them in a second. Right? So that's your movement that we're gonna talk about. What those target primarily your hamstrings, okay? There is gonna be a little bit of glute work in there. It's gonna be your lower glutes, so kind of like the tie-in area. But predominantly a stiff leg deadlift, a Romanian deadlift, RDL is going to target your hamstrings, which is back here. It is the back of your legs. Now, a lot of people feel Romanian deadlifts in their lower back, so we want to work away from that. I'm gonna tell you guys how. So, first thing you're gonna think about is your stance with your deadlift. The majority of people are going to want to take a shoulder width stance for your RDL. You can go a little bit wider. Most people are actually not going to get the most benefit out of a slightly wider stance unless it is programmed into your program for a specific reason. If we're talking general learning of movements, I recommend about a shoulder width stance. First thing you're going to do, drive your feet into the floor. You already want tension pushing down. You're going to activate your core, and you're going to think about having a really good posture, shoulders down and back, okay? Now, your hamstrings, what we're going to do with them is we are going to lengthen them and we are going to shorten them. So every muscle is going to have an origin point and an insertion point. So muscles attach to bones. Your hamstrings, the origin is always going to be closest to the midline of your body. So your hamstrings, they originate at your pelvis and they insert down here, okay? So we want to lengthen that muscle and shorten that muscle. So how we do that is through our hip hinge motion. So again, we're setting up our execution here, and now we're keeping our back nice and flat, and we're driving our hips and we're hinging. So you guys can even do this with me if you want. We're hinging at the hips, we're not dropping our body. This is what we see all the time, is just bend down. Do you guys see the difference? Watch this. See how I'm bending here versus hinging. So you actually want to get your butt back as far as you can before your body starts to drop, okay? So we're starting at the top, hinging at the hip, core is engaged. If you do this, no. And if you have a weak core, I don't think my client Melissa is here. Melissa's been working with me for like 7 years. She used to have a very weak core, and she would have to fight it. Like, she would do her deadlift, and she'd have to like fight her like weak core. So core is engaged. We're hinging at the hip, sending the glutes back, back, back. Now, as you're sending your glutes back, you think of like a string pulling them back. You're also driving your feet down. So see how I'm lengthening, lengthening, lengthening. So I'm essentially moving that insertion point farther away. The origin point, sorry, farther away from the insertion point. So I'm stretching, and then this would be a shortened hamstring. Again, you could do a hamstring curl variation, which would shorten it even more, but we're talking about deadlift. So this is going to be your lengthened position. This is going to be where a deadlift is the most challenging. You also want to keep your weights nice and close to your body, because if you have your weights out here, your back is going to start to round, and we're going to be putting that weight into our back, not into our hamstrings, right? So those dumbbells are going to stay nice and close to your shins. Drive your glutes back. Now, some of you guys might only be able to get to here. That is completely fine. That is going to be your range of motion. You are going to want to stop when your back starts to round or you start to feel that in your back, okay? So for me, I have pretty good mobility in my hips, so I can go pretty low. Most of the time, we don't recommend dropping your body more than parallel to the floor. So typically, most people are going to want to stop about here. If you're advanced, sometimes you can go a little farther as long as you're still feeling it in your hamstrings. But for most people, going to here is going to be totally fine. Let me know if that makes sense, you guys. So when you have your dumbbells, you want to keep them nice and close. Nice and close. You want to also activate your lats. So see how if I don't have my lats activated here. So my arms are kind of falling forward. You can already see the internal rotation on my shoulders, right? So you can probably see because I have good lats. When I turn them on and activate them, my shoulders activate too. But I'm essentially squeezing into my armpit to keep my arms nice and stable. Keeping the weights nice and close to my shin. Core is engaged. Shoulders are down away from my ears. Hinging at the hips, right? I'm not dropping my body. I'm hinging at that hip joint, cracking my hips like a door, sending my glutes back. My head is in line with my spine. Big mistake I see, looking up, looking down. Your head is always, 100% of the time, wanting to be in line with your spine in every single exercise. Dumbbells are nice and close, or a barbell if you're using a barbell, and you're going down until you feel your back start to either round this way, right? Your core is starting to give out, or round this way. You want to feel that in your hamstrings, backs of your legs. Now when you come up, you're going to come up with control by driving your feet down to the floor, pushing the floor down, and standing up, doing the exact opposite movement. You're going to stand up straight at the top. You do not need to go like this because we already have our hamstrings in their most shortened position here. My hamstrings stay whether I go here or not. Now I'm just straining my back, right? Most of the time what we see, this, right? You can see how that is doing nothing. My hamstrings are not lengthening or shortening. All I'm doing is thrusting my back out. No wonder it hurts, you guys, all right? Let me know if that makes sense. We are gonna move on to the squat. So, drop in a comment if that was helpful. Let me know if you learned something about the RDL. We're gonna be talking about squats. I love squats. They are so important. Having a squat variation of some variety, whether it's a barbell squat, a goblet squat, even if you have some limitation with a squat, like some type of leg press variation, you almost always want to have a squat or lunge movement in your program. So same checklist. We're going through exactly like we did with your deadlifts, right? The first thing is always the stance. If you just jump in and you start squatting, right, you're not set up properly, everything's out of alignment, you don't know what you're doing, you have no tension. Time under tension for muscle growth is absolutely essential. So you're gonna set up your feet. You guys, this is really important. Always pay attention to your feet. Always, everything starts at your feet. Pay attention to your feet, the placement of your feet, the angle of your feet, your ability to drive your feet into the floor. It all starts at your feet. Stability is everything. So pushing the floor down. I'm gonna start my squat. A general stance for your squat is going to be slightly wider than hip width with your toes slightly pointing out. There are lots of variations. You can do, a close stance squat. You can do a wide stance squat. You can do more of a plie squat. You can do more of a sumo squat. There are a lot of variations. There's no right or wrong way. It depends on what you're trying to target, what's in your program, what's in your past phases, your mobility, your body type, like a bunch of things. But general squat is going to be slightly wider than shoulder width and toes slightly pointing out. If you are someone who really struggles with squats, it may benefit you to take a little bit wider stance. The reason is the wider your stance goes, the less range of motion you're moving. So you guys can even see that. If I do this, which would be basically considered a sumo, watch how, I don't move. My actual range of motion in the squat isn't a ton. But if I'm doing a closer stance squat, watch how much like range of motion I have, right? Like I'm moving a lot more. But again, going back to the general stance. Now a lot of people also think like wide stance is for your glutes and narrow stance is for your quads. That's so not true. Like it's not true at all. It could be true in select instances, depending on a ton of other variables, but as a general thing, it's very false. What actually that's going to change is the wider stance you go, the more you're going to target your adductors, so your inner thighs. If you're wanting to tone up or build your inner thighs, you're going to want to do several more kind of sumo movements. Do you still target your glutes? Yes, but arguably, and again, there's instances in which there is gray area here, excuse me, but arguably, if you even look at my glutes, they almost move less in a sumo, the actual glute muscle, not the hamstring, so glute is just from here to here, than in a more narrow stance. Like I get more of a stretch in my glutes in a moderately narrow stance. But again, I also have very, very small hips. My hip width is very small. So in your squat, a few things you want to think about. Starting with your feet. Feet must. This is a must. This is a black and white must. Your feet must stay planted to the floor. Obviously. But it's not obvious because I would say 85% of people that I have worked with, and I have worked with a lot, you guys, their feet do not stay planted to the floor and squat until they are aware of it. 85% of the people at the gym I see squatting, their feet are not planted to the floor. 85% of people, you guys can see my feet, right? What's happening is one of the following. They're either squatting down and their heels are lifting. Usually it's one heel. They don't even know. Their heels are, or their knee or ankles. Oftentimes it's actually just their ankle caving in, right? Sometimes they're actually going outward. Sometimes it's only one side. So you really want to be aware of that if you're training at home. Even taking off your shoes for your squats, super, super beneficial to really build that connection and movement pattern. If you are training at a gym and you're wearing shoes, unless you have like an extreme foot issue, you always want to have a flat-soled shoe, like a Converse, Vans, Nobles, something that is flat. You do not want to squat. Maybe there'd be like a couple select exceptions in an elevated or cushioned shoe. Okay, upper body, it really doesn't matter as much. Lower body, you want flat, or like those shoes that literally like are your feet. You know what I mean? So feet must stay planted. Now, when we're going into our squat movement, you want to keep your knees in line with your toes. So if you're doing a more narrow stance, your knees are going to travel in line with your toes. If we're doing a more wide stance, your knees are going to travel in line with your toes. Oftentimes I see a wider stance, people's knees are traveling this way. Sometimes they're doing a narrow stance and their knees are traveling this way. Knees always in line with your toes. That goes for any squat pattern. It goes for leg press, it goes for lunges, it goes for split squats. Knees travel in line with your toes. Your knees can go over your toes if you want them to, but they must travel in line with your toes. Now, the range of motion with your squat, you probably have heard some controversy around it. Should you go ass to the grass, whatever. The range of motion in your squat is not the most important thing, right? Your ability to squat and do it properly is the most important thing. So a lot of people and a lot of our clients are going to start with a very limited range of motion in their squat, and that is totally okay. So if your squat, I'll show you from the side because it makes a little more sense. We're going to do our typical like average squat, like slightly wider than hip width, toes slightly pointing out. My knees are going to travel in alignment with my toes. My core is engaged. My shoulders are down and back. I also have my back engaged, you guys, because we want to keep our back engaged. Otherwise, we're going to have bad posture and internal rotation, especially as we fatigue. So if this is your range of motion in your squat, that is totally fine. How you would know that is if your butt starts to, do that like butt wing thing, your core starts to give out, or your body starts to fall forward. Or, your toes or your heels or your ankles start to lift or cave, okay? Those would all be indicators that you are squatting too low or using too much weight at this point in time, right? We want to be working on improving our range of motion, but that can take weeks. It can take years sometimes, but usually it takes weeks. dragging my feet down, knees top line with my toes, tight core, shoulders down to back, back is engaged, head is in line with my spine, my body and back staying flat and upright. We're squatting down, squatting down, squatting down. If my butt starts to wink here, that's my range of motion. I'm going back up, right? And you will find more often, more quickly than you expect, that your range of motion will deepen, right? And it doesn't usually take as long as you think it does. Let me know if that makes sense to you guys. I'm gonna take a little drink of water. Now, I do get a question sometimes about how to target more quad versus more glute in like a squat or lunge or leg press. It has less to do with the width of your stance and a lot more to do with the movement at your hip versus at your knee, okay? So if there is more movement at the knee joint than the hip joint, you're typically going to be recruiting more quad. Now, you cannot get away from training one versus the other in a squat pattern. You're going to train them both, right? So if you are wanting to train the glutes more, and the one little nuance I will say is that unless you're an advanced athlete, and like just train right. Don't worry about trying to hit your glutes more. Just freaking do the exercise right. Unless you are advanced and you have like goals of trying to grow the glute med or like these really fine tuning like tweaks, like Bella, who's potentially competing this in the future, like she has very fine tuning goals. Same with Laura, same with Joan. But someone who's just trying to build their glutes, just do the exercise properly, right? Just do your glute exercises. Don't worry about trying to target a little bit more. Like if you do it right, you will target it and you will see the growth. But even for a leg press, for example, if you place your feet up higher on the leg press within reason, you're gonna get more movement at your hip and less movement at your knee. It's gonna recruit slightly more glute. So to demonstrate, hopefully you guys can see this, in a lunge, and this would be the same as a squat, but it's easier to see from the side in a lunge. See how my knee is getting quite a bit of movement here as opposed to my hip. So the hip joint angle is here, the knee joint is here. So see how this angle compared to this angle, right? So there I'm going to be recruiting a decent amount of quad. Am I still recruiting glute? Yes, but a good amount of quadricep here, right? Now, if I were to instead lunge like this, I'm getting more glute. See the angle of my hip here compared to the angle at my knee. So my shin is staying relatively perpendicular to the floor. And if I elevated my foot, it would even create a bigger stretch in the glute, right? Because again, we're talking about stretching the muscle. So you can see here how I'm getting more stretch in the glute, less stretch in the quad. Back to my start. More stretch in the glute, less in the quad. Now I'm going to switch it. Less stretch in the glute, more stretch in the quad. Makes sense, you guys? Drop in a comment if that makes sense for your squats. Final little tip I was gonna say is if you're doing a barbell squat, look at your barbell or your Smith. Look at it. Make sure you're setting it up in the middle of the bar because a lot of people are off to one side and they don't even look at that. So pay attention to that. Same thing if you're picking up dumbbells. Look at them. Like, are you holding them in the same spot? Are you holding them in the middle? Some people are literally holding them like this, like one in the front, one in the back, and they don't even know. If you're holding your goblet like a goblet, make sure it's centered. Make sure your shoulders aren't like this. Make sure your back is also engaged. Let me know if that makes sense. We're gonna move on to lateral raises. These are my favorite exercise, especially for upper body. So, lateral raises. Do you guys know what lateral raises are? I'm pretty sure you do after today's workout. So quick tip for your shoulders. This tip works for almost all shoulder exercises. I would say you can apply it at least 80 to 90% of the time. There might be a few times where it doesn't fully apply, but almost always this will apply. So you have 3 heads to your shoulders, right? So you have the front delt, lateral delt, rear delt. Front, side, back, anterior, lateral delt, posterior delt are the official names for them. So when you're working your shoulders, you're working 3 different muscles. Whatever muscle is on the top is going to work the most. So if you are doing a front raise, you are typically, you can see the front delt is on top, you're going to be recruiting more front delt. If you are doing a lateral raise, your lateral delt, your side shoulder, is on top. If you are doing a rear delt raise or a reverse fly, your rear delt is on top, okay? So that's a pretty foolproof way to think about what area of the shoulder you're working, because again, you want the awareness. If you're trying to train your lateral delt and get these nice shoulder caps, you want to make sure you're targeting that and that you're doing the exercises that are going to efficiently build that muscle. So when you are doing your lateral raise, and these, I see these massacred, you guys, all the time, every day in the gym, every single day that I go there. You're gonna grab your dumbbells. Same setup that we're always gonna do. Typically you're gonna want about a shoulder width stance. Drive the floor down with your feet, core engaged, good posture. Now, I could do this for 100,000 hours, I bet you. Literally, I could do probably 5 zillion reps like this. So there's really no point in even doing this movement if you're trying to build muscle, because it's not building anything. So when you do your lateral raises, talking about the setup, make sure your lateral delts are turned on, okay? So you want to start the movement with the weight a little bit away from yourself, because otherwise there's no point. There's no point in doing this part of the movement. If you are using a cable machine and it is across you, you're already going to have tension on the muscle there, so that changes things. But if you are using dumbbells, there is no tension on your muscles in this part, so there's no point in doing it. Bring it a little bit away from your body and turn on your lateral delt. So you can see mine, I've turned them on. So my shoulders are already burning right now. I haven't even started the movement. And my rear delt or my lateral delts are pumping. You guys can probably see the blood going to them right now and see them getting bigger because I'm already engaging them, right? So now I'm gonna start my movement. We wanna think about the anatomy of our delt. So lateral delt, the insertion point, the origin is gonna be on your clavicle, so it's up here. That's gonna originate here on the humerus. So from your elbow down has nothing to do with your shoulder, nothing. Which is really important to know because a lot of people throw their lateral raises like this. And you're not lengthening or shortening your shoulder muscle. You're literally moving your elbow, which has nothing to do with your shoulder. So you want to think of your arms. So a lot of people will use the cue, like lead with your elbow. And I wouldn't say it's bad, but I feel like it can be misleading sometimes because you can still lead with your elbow and like throw your weight, right? So I like to instead think of my arm as one unit. That's what I always told myself is one unit. Because what actually matters is pushing this part of your arm, so like the humerus part, away from your body, right? This is what we're actually trying to do. So, starting here, initiating with the side delt, I'm gonna move up. We typically wanna go to about parallel to the floor. We're gonna go back down to starting point and back up. So I'm thinking about pushing my upper arm away from my body and back down. Now if I go more than parallel to the floor to go here, now my front delt is on top and my front delt has now started to take over, right? So we wanna think about what part of the muscle is on top, and we're moving with control in each direction, because if we go up here and we drop back down, we lost half of the movement almost. There's the eccentric contraction and the concentric contraction, and isometric as well, but we won't talk about that one today. So starting away from your body a little bit, going up, control, going down. Now if you can't even pause for like half a second at the top, you're going way, way, way too heavy. A lot of people are like, should I bend my elbow? Should I not bend my elbow? Typically I'll tell our clients to have a slight bend in their elbow. However, when I first started training my lateral delts, I couldn't feel them when I would bend my elbow. So if you really can't feel them, it will probably benefit you for a few weeks to train with a more straight arm until you can really get that connection to your lateral delts. And then typically you're gonna wanna have a slight bend in that elbow. So I'll show you from the side, setting up my stance, my head is in line with my spine, moving with control. Right, you never, ever, ever wanna have your hand up here. Right, you always wanna kinda have your palms down and control. Let me know if that makes sense. We never wanna use inertia or momentum. So doing this bounce, you guys, don't do it. It's taking away the work from your shoulder. It's taking away the work. Let me know if that makes sense. Drop in a comment. I'm just looking at my notes that I wrote down to make sure I didn't miss anything for those. Let's move on to rows. What muscles do rows target? Drop it in the comments, you guys. What are the two main muscles that you're gonna wanna be targeting in a row? So we're gonna talk about a bent over row today. However, a lot of these concepts will still apply to like your cable row or machine row or any other row variation. The only difference is I'm gonna teach the bent over version, which is a little more complicated because you're gonna be in a bent over position. So, the two main muscles, I shouldn't say the two main muscles in your back, but the two main muscles that we are concerned with are going to be your lats and your rhomboids. So don't confuse your lats with your lateral delt. So the lats in your back are different. Your lats are that wing-like muscle. So on your lats, the origin is going to be on your thoracic spine, and then they insert up here by your humerus. So they are basically two of them, and they're kind of like that wing shape along your back. And then you have your rhomboids as well. So your rhomboids are those two that kind of run down the middle. Those ones are going to originate at your on your thoracic spine as well, and then they're going to insert on your scapula, so on your shoulder blades. Those are the two primary back muscles that we're going to want to target in a typical row movement. The muscles that take over for a lot of people in a row movement or a lot of back exercises are going to be your traps, which are obviously like these muscles up here. Those take over for a lot of people, and it's kind of like a running joke in the bodybuilding industry where if you have big traps, like it's a sign you don't know what the fuck you're doing. And like I think that very much applies. I wouldn't say it's kind of a silly thing, but most people with overdeveloped traps, your traps love to take over everything. And if you lift too heavy, your traps are going to grow and nothing else is going to grow because your traps are doing all the work. So it's actually funny, like I actually have slightly underdeveloped traps because I've kind of like purposely like turned them off in every single exercise. So for me, ironically, I'm like, oh, I gotta start building my traps up a little more. But it's like a running joke where like if you have big traps, you have bad form. I know that's not 100% true, but it's kind of funny. Your arms, like your biceps, will often also take over, especially, and I wish my fiance is here. If he's listening, he can tell you how training lats with me changed his life. Because he actually has such a good back now. He's in the middle of his cut. I posted his building phase a couple weeks ago on the story. I don't know if you guys saw it, but check out our stories because in about 3 weeks he's done his cut and his back looks so amazing. But he did not know how to train his lats before. He didn't use them. Like he would use his biceps for like all back movements and then wonder why he couldn't get stronger. And it's like your biceps are tiny. Your lats are like one of the biggest muscles in your body. And like once he learned how to train his lats properly, which was like 5 years ago now, they are like giant. They're so good. Giant for him. Like he's obviously not a bodybuilder, but for him, like they're looking so big. But yeah, you gotta learn how to train lats. And I shouldn't say luckily enough, but I swam. So swimmers have big lats because you use your lats so much when you're training. So like if I do my like figure flex for Bella, my lats are giant. I don't even train lats hardly at all anymore because they are overdeveloped and they take over in my other movements. So bring it back to that. Typically your biceps are going to take over in your back movements, your traps are going to take over, or your, in a weird roundabout way, your front delt is not necessarily going to take over, but it is going to get excessive strain on it, which is not good, especially if you already have slightly poor posture or slightly internal rotation. which you likely have if you either work at a desk or operating equipment. Not everyone, but oftentimes that's the case. So if you are one of those people who sits for work a lot, you're really going to want to dial in your back training properly. It's also super attractive to have like nice posture. And if you have a really strong back, then you're automatically going to have good posture because those muscles are going to hold you in place. So, your stance. Again, we're going back to top. It's that same concept over and over and over again, with the awareness, the setup, the initiation, the execution. So setting up our stance for our bent over row is going to be our bent over position. Now, I challenge you guys, if you don't know this, to practice it with me right now. Because you have to master this bent over position for any bent over exercise. And you have to be able to hold this bent over position forever, you guys. Forever. So this is essentially going to be your bent over position. Practice this, because I remember when I first started to learn it, I couldn't even hold this for like 10 seconds before my back felt like it was going to give out because my core was so weak. But how do you expect to be able to train your back and lift weight with your lats and your rhomboids if you can't even hold your body weight here, right? So practice this. So what you're going to do is you're going to drive your feet down, take a shoulder width or slightly wider than shoulder width stance, hinge at the hips, just like we talked about in the deadlift, sending those hips back, and you want your back nice and flat. Because again, we want to get our arms through a full range of motion, targeting our back. And if we're up here, again, our arms are going to take over because we're not getting that full range of motion. We're doing this, which is essentially a shitty bicep curl at a shitty angle that makes no sense because we're just working against gravity. So we're getting into that good position. Send those glutes back, like over-exaggerated at the beginning. Slight bend in the knee. Oftentimes, this is what I see. I see this, you guys. Your knees are way up here. So if you're practicing this at home right now, you're like this, move your knees back. Move them back. Okay? Bend them, move them back. Keep your knees, try to keep your shin like almost parallel to the floor. Okay, so this is going to be your position. Now, I'm going to grab my dumbbells in a minute, but again, just practice without weight. We want to, again, full range of motion is going to look like that to target your back. So you might even want to reach ahead a little bit to get that stretch. Again, we would think about our lat, it inserts here, right? So we want to get that stretch, pulling, keeping our shoulders down away from our ears, because if we start to bring them up, that's that strain going into the front delt that I talked about. What I see at the gym also, especially with a single arm bent over row, I see this. I was talking to Laura about this too. It's like this. We do this. What is this? What is this? We talked about lengthening and shortening our back, right? So we have to lengthen and shorten our back. That's how we do it, like right here. This is just internally rotating your front delt and pulling against gravity to indirectly shitty work your bicep, right? So let me grab my DBs. All right, getting into our position. Core is nice and engaged. Back is flat. Head, I'm looking at the camera, you guys, but head should be in line with my spine. Not down here, not up here, not looking at you guys. Head in line with my spine. Starting here, I'm going to pull, right? I'm retracting my scapula, pulling back my shoulder blades, aiming my elbows towards my hips, towards my butt, not up at the sky, towards my hips. And then I'm pinching my elbows just a slight bit at the top, because again, our back, it originates at our spine. So if we can get that little bit of extra, like, I don't know if you guys can see this, and obviously if you're in your bent over position, but you're going from here, and then you're going back, and you're just tucking your elbows just a little bit. Full range in your back, because if you can see my back, and I'm doing this, do you guys see my back doing anything? No, it's doing nothing. It's doing nothing. So you're going to breathe in and then out as you do your contraction. Does that make sense, you guys? Now, there are other row variations. That is your basic dumbbell row.